Sun cast a shadow, a digital line is coming over the mountain and over your mind. Double down your Bitcoin, hang on for the ride. We're moving into the future, one block at a time. We're moving into the future, one block at a time.
Welcome to Once Upon a Coin, documenting the ongoing history of blockchain and cryptocurrency. And as always, I'm your storyteller, Jason Casti. Today's tale is about a newcomer to the crypto space, a project that came out of absolutely nowhere to make a huge impact on the up-and-coming NFT sector. This project made a lot of money, got a lot of attention, and captured the imaginations of many with about the most basic idea you could conjure up. And the thing is, it worked like a charm. This is the story of loot. Let's kick things off by addressing the basics here first. Loot is an NFT project that is really in a category all unto itself. It consists of 8,000 pieces of randomized adventurer gear generated and stored on the Ethereum blockchain. Each piece of gear comes in a loot bag and was originally a free mint at launch, assuming you were willing to pay the transaction fees and gas to claim your gear. The kicker here is that loot gear are purely text-based NFTs, built around a role-playing game or RPG style theme. You, as the owner, are left to interpret both the visuals of what your loot gear may look like and what stats you may want to apply to it. To be honest, the whole point of loot is to let you build your own adventure around it. Loot was created in August of 2021 by a man named Dom Hoffman, who has a history of building compelling projects, having previously founded Vine, the now defunct video streaming service.
I'm gonna jump on social media and I'm gonna tweet about it until my fingers bleed. I might even send an Instagram or a Vine.
He also created Peach, a social networking app along with Byte, another video streaming service that was meant to be the successor to Vine. As you can see, Hoffman has a knack for creating interesting products and services, but these days he's fixed his attention solely on the crypto world, having also launched another NFT project called Supdrive. Loot gear can represent weapons, armor, or other items that will aid you in your adventures as you navigate through the Web3 world. To be clear, loot gives you a framework to build a game around using the gear, and because it doesn't come with any predefined stats or visuals, you get to decide how, when, why, and where it's used. Loot has no team or company behind it, making it the perfect blank canvas for people to come in and build around it as they choose. It's also somewhat uncensorable, as you won't have anyone upset that their art is being reused or appropriated. And with no copyrights or trademarks to worry about either, with loot, what you see really is what you get. And that isn't a whole lot, which is kind of the whole point of loot in the first place. So how was loot received given that it was a free mint at launch? Well, the NFT community went absolutely bonkers for it, sending the price of a loot bag to some crazy heights. Keep in mind, the project was launched right around the peak of the great bull market of 2021, this being the first time that NFTs were put center stage. With all the money pouring into the industry around this time, if you had a cool idea and were willing to take a risk by putting it out there, you could find your life changing in ways that you couldn't imagine if the public was picking up what you were putting down. And this was the case for loot. People just loved it.
All right, so there's this whole insane loot phenomenon that has gone on, and it's really important, I think, as a concept. We don't know if this particular loot thing is going to be the thing that it promises to be, but people have gotten really excited about it, and it's taken the NFT, Twitter sphere, DeFi people by absolute storm.
Within weeks of its release, the project was becoming a hot topic, and the concept of loot being the foundation that you can build exciting Web3 games on top of was well received by the public. There were some critics too, of course, with the main arguments being the clear lack of visuals and direction. So basically, you either got loot and accepted it for its simplicity, or you rejected it and were probably more comfortable with the traditional NFT project that tried to give you everything up front. By September, just 1 month after its release, the floor price for a loot bag was going for 13 Ether. And with 1 Ether going for 3,400 US at the time, That meant to buy a loot bag, it was gonna set you back a whopping 44,000 US dollars. And that was just to get your foot in the door. On September 2nd, a loot bag sold for, get ready for this, 250 ETH, or just shy of 1 million US dollars at the time. Like I said, this was a bull market, and when you've got FOMO fever, wild stuff takes place. Fully embracing the community spirit, Will Papper, co-founder at Syndicate DAO, decided to add some fuel to the creative fire when he launched an ERC20 fungible token called Adventure Gold. Each unique loot bag was assigned 10,000 tokens, so as long as you actually owned a loot bag, you were now getting some pretty sweet free coinage. Loot now had its own currency, created by someone who had some established credibility in the industry. With so much money pouring into the project from the very start, in part due to Hoffman's incredible timing, there was now only really one direction to go, and that was down. To illustrate this point, September of 2021 saw Loot conduct a ridiculous 221 million US dollars in trading volume. But just 1 month later in October, that volume dropped all the way down to $12 million, constituting a 95% crash. So, if you're one of the lucky few to grab a loot bag at the start during the free mint, then you did incredibly well here. However, if you came to the project soon after and made a purchase on the secondary market, then you are now likely in a world of financial hurt. Exhibit A for this meltdown can be found by looking at the following tweet from Kal Samani, one of the managing partners at the investment firm Multicoin Capital. Samani proudly exclaimed that he had purchased 8 figures worth of loot gear, or 10 million US dollars plus. Naturally, this situation created a lot of bag holders, no pun intended. And while Hoffman didn't promise anything extravagant with the project, given the amount of crazy FOMO that took place early on, it basically set the stage for some major expectations from loot holders, even if that was just a sellout at a higher price. The community wanted to know when all these Web3 games were coming, given that loot functioned like the Lego pieces for the NFT gaming space. The problem is that this was just too early for something like that to be taking place on a major scale. Hoffman himself even acknowledged that the hype train may have left the station a little bit prematurely when it came to loot. This free fall in prices coincided with the final days of the bull market. In retrospect, many people were able to identify that loot had snuck in right before the ending of the market action, leaving most investors on the wrong side of a high-stakes financial game of musical chairs. Community members stepped up once the realization hit that to bring long-lasting value to loot, some real innovative applications for it would first need to exist. This helped inspire such creations as Realms, a collection of games meant to utilize loot. Others took a different approach with the advent of Loot's first dungeon map project called Crypts and Caverns. And before long, any project related to loot was being dubbed part of the Lootverse, a tip of the hat to the greater metaverse hype cycle that was concluding around this time as well. This was branded as Chapter 1, which revolved around grabbing all of your loot gear and any other items that would come in handy later on. The Loot Foundation was created as a means of keeping tabs of all the community-based projects that were being built within the Lootverse, serving as something like the Loot Bible. In an effort to progress the Loot story, a new swath of projects began to launch that were now revolving around your Loot character. After all, someone had to be wearing all this gear eventually, right? Loot defined this era as Chapter 2. This took place in early 2022 and came in the form of Loot Characters, the first collection to be specifically crafted to visualize the Loot adventurer gear. This is an associate of NFT, which means that your Loot character would basically be a derivative of your Loot gear bag, tied to it forever via the blockchain. Other character-based releases soon followed, such as Loot Explorer and Hyperloot, all ways of generating a character that you could equip with your Loot gear. Fast forward to the fall of 2023, and Loot is still chugging along with a core fanbase experimenting on games, applications, and add-ons to help give the project some real substance. Taking a peek at the official Loot website also reveals a lot more going on than just the official Loot gear itself. Genesis Loot, banners, rings, Settler Realm, Level Up, the list is starting to get pretty damn big, and there's new projects popping up all the time that are looking to add to the Lootverse. 2 years in now, and the project continues to find innovative ways to bring creative ideas forth that help bring utility to Loot characters and gear. Loot's weakness is also its strength. Because there's no dedicated team or a massive reserve of funds that were raised from an ICO or a VC, the onus for seeing Loot succeed long-term is squarely placed on the community itself. If the general feeling is that loot was just a flash in the pan, then the project will almost assuredly die. However, if, as we're seeing so far, a core group of fans are willing to get their hands dirty and roll up their sleeves, then the project has a real chance.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
And that's because we'll see more features released that will help flesh out what is fast becoming a real ecosystem forming around loot. Here on the show, we look at projects, people, technologies, and events that have made a serious impact on the industry. And being a historical documentary series, that often means that there's several years of history for us to unpackage. Loot, though, is a bit different. It's a relatively new entrant into the collective consciousness of the blockchain space. So, while the project hasn't had much time to accrue very much XP yet, if it keeps grinding away like it has so far, there's a real chance that it becomes a fixture of the Web3 gaming space in the future. For myself, this type of quirky offering really intrigues me. This industry produces a lot of crap at times, but it also produces some pretty cool stuff once in a while. And this is how I see loot. No AAA gaming studio was ever going to be producing a product like this. This was only ever going to happen in our corner of the universe, or should I say, Lootverse. One of my favorite things is a deck of playing cards, and on its own it's pretty much useless, but with the creative imagination of millions of people around the world, you now have games like poker, cribbage, bridge, euchre, and that's basically how I see loot, wrapped in a Web3 wrapper. So, if I've managed to pique your curiosity, then I strongly advise you to take a hard, long look at loot. The prices for a loot bag have come down considerably, with $500 in Ether probably getting you a bag of gear to start your quest if you're patient with making offers on markets like OpenSea. Sure, loot may not be the second coming of Dungeons & Dragons, but if there's even a minuscule chance it does one day, then you're watching this episode at the perfect time to keep an open mind and try out something new for a change. I hope you've enjoyed today's stroll down memory lane. Until next time, have fun and enjoy life, my friends. I'll be back soon with another incredible story to tell you.